Hey, if you're pregnant over 40, I have just the community for you. It's a private community away from Facebook where women just like you come together to meet and support one another during pregnancy. To sign up for the waitlist, go to over40fabulousandpregnant.com/waitlist and be the first to know when the membership is open. I can't wait to see you inside. Welcome to Over 40 Fabulous and Pregnant. I am your host, Jamie Massey, and you're listening to episode 36. If you're looking for pregnancy stories of women over 40, you've come to the right place. Today on the show, we have Jo from Northern Ireland, who is a mindset healing coach for women. She is on to share her pregnancy with her rainbow baby after waiting 8 years. You know, I feel like we just had one of the busiest weeks of my life. We have been renovating, and last week we spent moving out of all of our bedrooms. And so that was fun. We have been sleeping on our living room floor, and we also have meat chickens. We've been raising our own meat, which is very near and dear to my heart. And we had meat chickens go to butcher. And so we put over 100 pounds of meat in our freezer. It really felt amazing. And we also had 4 flocks of chickens. And now we're down to 2, which feels so amazing and freeing. And so now we have flooring and we have less chickens. So amazing. But on top of all that, I've got a call with my embryologist that we are working to schedule the egg donor thaw. Either not this week. I think it's going to be the next week, which is totally fine. They said they're really busy and have people out. And I'm like, hey, I can wait one more week to have the attention on my eggs and embryos. So hopefully we will have all the embryos in 2 weeks, and maybe we'll get a little update. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. But enough about me. Let's get into Jo's fabulous pregnancy at 40. Jo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jo was just about 40 whenever she got pregnant. And before we get into her story, Jo, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I will indeed. Hi, I'm Jo McDonald. I am intuitive mama coach actually, and I can touch on where that came from in a while. So I have 3 children now. I have a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and now our little rainbow baby came into the world just last year. So she's just over 1.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And will you tell us about your journey getting pregnant?
I will indeed. So this time around, so obviously I had my previous pregnancies, and but this particular pregnancy is the one we're focusing on, and it is the most, beautiful experience. And we had tried for so long to bring our other little baby into the world, and we unfortunately had miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy then. So they were back in 2015 and 2018. And I suppose after having 2 children before it, you never really kind of think that that's ahead of you possibly. And you don't ever want to align to those kind of things happening. But unfortunately they did. And the first time round, I struggled really bad with the miscarriage, but after our ectopic, it was under the most surreal of circumstances, and my life was saved in the most surreal of circumstances by the most incredible surgeon. But I woke up after that surgery. I needed surgery after it, and I just said I had to make it count. I needed to make it count for me. I needed to make it count for my family. I needed to make it count for other women that I wanted to help. I just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that I somehow had to make that count, that I didn't want others to have to go through the experiences that we had, or certainly not alone anyway, without help. And I wanted to somehow find the strength and the courage and everything else that I might need to be able to bring another little baby into the world. Obviously, none of that's ever guaranteed, but I just really wanted to do whatever I felt I could do within me to be able to be as strong as possible.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so basically that we started then on the journey. Really, I started on a healing journey, both physically and emotionally. And I thought I just wanted to get enough strength to be able to become pregnant. And unfortunately, that just wasn't happening. So our ectopic was March 2018. And now we did take a little while for both my and the thing is, obviously, after you go through these things, you have to think about both yourself and your partner and everybody else around you, really. And it took a little while for us to really start to be able to even get to the point where we could even have those conversations about, are we ready to try again? And to get to the point where we felt we were ready to try again and be able to face whatever that might be. And I had started really a path, because I wanted to help other women. I had started a path of different personal development, of different mindset things. And a lot of that was possibly with the view of helping other people. But then I started to realize, whenever we weren't getting pregnant, that, hold on a wee second, I still have so much healing of my own to do. And the surgeon at the time had sort of said to us, because of my age, and, you know, what is age really in these things, but they had said to come back after 6 months if we hadn't got pregnant. So this unfortunately was in the height of COVID, and obviously lots of other pressures and priorities within our health service. So it took a little while for that appointment to come round. And when we did get our first referral appointment, I was just a few days off 39, and the appointment wasn't what I expected. The surgeon was very much straight and to the point. He said, you're this age, and within the terms of our own health service, if we wanted to refer it for IVF, we had to get it away straight away. We needed to refer right away. Because of my age, he felt that was the only other option, because it had taken us so long at that point to try and get pregnant and it wasn't working. And so he referred me both for IVF and a few different sort of fertility tests, really. And that was quite a shock for me, because I didn't really think I was on a fertility journey. And obviously it's classed as secondary infertility whenever you've had one or two before. But we were then on what I didn't realize on a fertility journey. And that healing and that hope and everything that I was doing up to that point become even more important to me, even more important to start to hold that hope. And I always talk about moving from the fear. I had a bit of a fear of getting pregnant, a fear of not getting pregnant, fear of what would I do if I was pregnant. And actually, looking back, all of that time was really, really valuable for me, because what it did, it strengthened my hope, it strengthened my courage, it strengthened everything within me for me to really be able to become pregnant. And I then started to realize, and people may or may not believe or may not align to this, but I started to realize that potentially some of these traumas and different things can have that impact on your body. So my body had healing to do as well as my mind. But the thing is, and it wasn't until I started to unsurface some of these things, you know, I was still holding quite a lot of trauma from, you know, my first birth, from my second birth, and all of these things were still, I was still holding these trauma, never mind the actual, you know, the losses and the events around those. So long story short, or maybe not short, we managed to get pregnant naturally, spontaneously at the age of 39. I was just before my 40th birthday whenever we found out that we were pregnant. And I have to say, it just was such an incredible, incredible miracle to me that we became pregnant on our own, whenever, you know, on paper, that might not have ever happened. And if we had to go down the route of different treatments, that's what we were going to do. I had aligned myself to whatever I needed to do to try to do that. But we were just so blessed that we did become pregnant naturally.
Will you walk us kind of through that? Were you timing intercourse, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Oh, we were doing, and it was funny because these things you kind of go through, don't you? Like, so I certainly had like apps on my phone, and I was tracking and I was checking when I was ovulating. I had the ovulating strips and probably different vitamins and things I was taking. Now, my diet and my lifestyle maybe weren't still 100% what they might have needed to be, but, you know, it was what it was. But I certainly was tracking. And incidentally, when I went into one of my fertility appointments and I explained what I was doing, one of the surgeons says, "Nope, stop that. You're doing too much. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. Just go and enjoy your husband." was the advice I got from one of the surgeons. But then you get conflicting advice, really, don't you? You know, other ones are saying, "No, you need to know specifically when these things were." So yeah, we were tracking that, and you have these romantic notions. And we went away actually for our 10-year anniversary, and the dates were all working out, and it was the first time we'd ever been away without the kids. And I was like, "Oh, this is amazing! You know, this is when it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen now." And you have these months, and you obviously these months and months go by, and you're hoping. But for whatever reason, at that point, I thought that was the time. And then I come back and so hopeful. And actually, I ended up in the hospital with a bee sting or a wasp sting. I can't remember which. And I took an allergic reaction to it. So unfortunately, I found out at that point, no, I was not pregnant. And I was allowed the antibiotics for my bee sting, my wasp sting. So the romantic notions, I suppose, of when you might have got pregnant came and went, and they came and they went, and they came and they went, and the months went by and the weeks went by, and and that's hard to deal with, and it's hard to keep the momentum going and keep when all of the different advice that you're given. But back to that healing that I was doing, that for me was what was driving me through. That to me was what was helping me in all of those scenarios. It was helping me be strong, being the mother. I still had to be the mother to my other two children. Mm-hmm. I always said to my husband, I didn't ever want this to impact either our own relationship together or that with my children. And I suppose, Jamie, that's some of the things that I actually had to process in that healing journey. Having or wanting another baby was never to replace any of the children, the little souls that I lost. Having or wanting another baby was never to replace the children I had in the world or the relationship with them. But as time goes on, I sort of had to process, right, well, this is now no longer going to be a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's now going to be X, Y, Z. And now I have my 1-year-old, my 9-year-old and my 12-year-old. And people still ask, "Oh, was that a wee late accident?" And you're like, you meet somebody in the street and then, people just have these sorts of comments, and it's like, mm-hmm. Well, no, this little one has been so long for and so long dreamed for. And yes, the dynamic in our house is much different than it might have ever been, but that's the way it is, really.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your healing journey? What physically were you doing at that time to really help with that?
Yeah, so physically, well, I suppose at the start, actually, the healing was a slow process in terms of physically. I was actually off my feet for quite some time at that point. And then I suppose I started to build it up and just trying to, eat more nutrients. So I was trying to eat better, but in saying that I kind of went to the wayside a little bit. I just was really trying to nourish my body after those losses. But for me, really, it was then that mental work, so that spiritual work, and that for me took lots of different forms. And it was something, and this is the thing, I was never a spiritual person. I never knew anything about the mind really before any of this, but I just was lucky enough to be brought both like the tools, the practices, the people, the coaches, as and when I was ready for them almost. So, if I had found the coach that I worked with throughout my fertility journey 3 years previous, I might not have really understood what she was talking about. But because I kind of was led in the right path, and I started to connect to, I suppose, the impact that my own thoughts would have, the impact that all of the conditioning has on you and on your body. And, so it's some energetic healing, really, I suppose, like of not specifically Reiki, but, an energetic healing where when I would have started that, I could really very much feel the pain and all of that low stored vibration around my womb. I mean, I literally, when I started some of those physical healing sessions, I could literally feel the pain. I could feel that all around my area, my womb, my whatever. But that started to subside as I was working mentally. So I done a lot of meditation. I did a lot of journaling, and that journaling formed so many different things. It was a mix of, somebody told me that, I had to align and be grateful for the life I had. I had to align and be grateful for the children I had, which I always was. And that experience made me even more so. It made me even more grateful for every single thing and person and experience I had in my life. And that's not always hard to do, because at the same time you're processing that trauma, you're processing that loss. But I had to veer more to that side to be able to heal myself. And I did that with the most beautiful support around me. But that took, as I say, meditation, the journaling. And the journaling was a mix of what I was happy for, what was I grateful for now. It was a mix of going through as I went, consciously thinking of the things, the barriers, the blocks that I felt I was having. And whether that was a physical or a mental block, it didn't particularly matter at that time, because whether it was causing me something physically in my body or whether it was going to block me in terms of being able to be strong in my mind, I processed it anyway. And as it says, that took the form of right back to traumatic birth, right back to the experiences we had, and addressing the age. I had to actually process, well, I'm now going to be a different age than I was, and will I be okay? Will I be fit enough? Will I be healthy enough? And the answer is absolutely. I was fitter, healthier in my pregnancy with Emma than I ever was with my other two. I have to say, I was glowing my whole pregnancy this time round. And so it was a lot of processing all of these different things and repatterning, I suppose, what was in my head from society. And this is the thing, even through pregnancies, whenever you are at a particular age, and I don't know what the age is that you start becoming high risk in the medical terms, you have to be able to be strong enough to cope with all of that, to not let that start to impact you, because actually, if you listen to all of this, it can really kind of bring you down. And the way I wanted to look at this pregnancy, as I say, because of all my healing, I was holding hope. And from the moment I get pregnant, I promised myself that whilst I knew there would be triggering times, I knew there would be triggering events and things, and I could never guarantee that I'd be 100% and the baby would make it, I was promised myself that I would hold that hope that she would come, and that I would hold that positivity and that connection. And I had the most beautiful connection with her right the way through, from the very, very moment that I found out that we were pregnant. And, my pregnancy test was interrupted actually midway. My cousin appeared at the door mid pregnancy test, and my husband were like, "Are you actually kidding?" Like, I had to go down, like it was still COVID time, so we just had to stand at the door and wave at them. But I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to go back up the stairs to check this." But at that point, I was fairly convinced, and I knew we were pregnant. And I wrote a journal entry actually, and it's funny, the memories were popping up on my photo memories recently, and I wrote a journal entry basically saying that I was promising myself and promising this little one that I would hold out the hope for her. And again, I kept saying her, and this is the thing, whenever I was in meditating and everything, I did feel that it was a wee baby girl. I felt that she had blonde hair, so there were certain things that just felt I felt so strong in, and everybody else around me thought I was absolutely, bonkers, but I just felt these things. And from that first day, I promised myself I would hold that hope. And the first appointment, obviously, when you've been through these experiences, you're going to advocate for yourself much more than maybe if you hadn't. And I didn't advocate for myself the time I got pregnant with my miscarriage, and I always sort of regretted it. So this time round, I made sure I would advocate for myself, and I would get the appointments and get the care and the attention that I felt I needed. So we went and we got the appointment around that 6-week mark, and it was back in that same room, back with that same surgeon that had saved my life, because he had said, "Call me whenever you're pregnant." And it was just such a surreal experience. Now, obviously, I agitated before it. I held my own for the 3 weeks before it, but then I did panic that day a little. However, I was able to hold that energy mostly. And I said to my husband, I'm going in with the energy of holding the hope. And just being in that room and seeing that tiny little dot on the screen, and that tiny little dot in the right place, is just that, that I will never, ever forget that experience. And, it can obviously still bring anxious things back, but I just was determined that I was going to hold that hope for her.
You found out at 6 weeks, and you went to your doctor that you used for the other ones.
Yeah.
How was your pregnancy?
Oh, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And it's all these things that perhaps I didn't do in my earlier pregnancies. And this time around, I was determined to. I was determined to take the photos. I was determined to really embrace it. Now, certainly I had the first trimester issues and whatever, that was fine. But I felt incredible. But that was a very conscious thing, Jamie. That was me very consciously. And I'm not saying every morning, but morning, night, whatever. I always did a meditation. I always connected to her. I sent her love. I learned ways to feel, because actually it's tricky, a normal pregnancy, you can feel that magic. Sometimes maybe in a pregnancy after loss, it's trickier to feel that magic, but I absolutely felt that magic in my body. I felt that I was nourishing her in every single way that she needed to. I felt that connection. I did meditation, sending my love right from my heart all the way down through my body, through my umbilical cord and through my womb, lighting up the womb, lighting her up, and just every cell in my body and every cell in her body. And it was so, so precious. And I mean, that was never anything I did before, and I felt amazing. But as I say, it was very conscious. I journaled, and I have so many journals here, both before I was pregnant and during my pregnancy, of how I wanted to bring her into the world. And I suppose what I was doing was bringing clarity to myself on what I would have liked. So I wanted care. I wanted to have that care and attention through pregnancy, but I really didn't want it to be invasive, or, I wanted at least that reassurance that what we were doing was working. And obviously we're in Northern Ireland here, so it's a slightly different health system, but I had gestational diabetes, so I did end up on a path where I was checked and scanned quite regularly. And with my previous history, I actually ended up in the hospital around the 12 to 13 week mark. I had a cyst on my ovary. But to me, so I went in to get that removed. But again, to me, that was all very much part of it. It was me processing being back in the hospital and getting rid of some of those fears, and trying to smooth away some of those things that I was still holding in my head and possibly in my body, to really just get to the point where I could be okay walking into that hospital for the appointments and be okay walking into it for the birth. And the surgeon, as I said, who had looked after me, under the terms of our health service, he was allowed to look after me in early pregnancy, and then he wasn't really allowed to afterwards because it was a different system. But he was able to deliver. So we were a planned section. I had a planned section with my second child. So whilst I was allowed the choice this time, they all said, look, it still was my choice. I didn't specifically have to be told that I would have a section this time. But we went with that choice. Myself and my husband together decided, is that right this time round? And for lots of different reasons, we decided, yes, that was the way we were going to go. Part of me would have possibly loved to have another natural delivery, but it felt right. It felt right for me, and it felt right for her, and it felt right certainly for my husband as well, that was going to be more controlled. And when you've had lots of other things happen to you, to know that control was going to be there, and I felt safer, albeit it's obviously major surgery, but I felt safer that we knew that that's when it was going to happen. And the fact that I could plan that he would actually deliver was incredible. And when I talk about the journals, I wrote down about the day that he would bring her into the world, and I wrote down what the energy in the room would be like. I wrote down how the exchange of looks between myself and him and the husband. And
tell us about your cravings. Did you have any?
Yes, ginger nuts. Ginger. I know that you don't have them, maybe ginger snaps or something. So yeah, in all of my pregnancies, I have had little appetite, a small appetite, but bread. So carbohydrates, bread, biscuits, absolutely, but definitely. Mm-hmm. And I think probably in the early days it's because I was feeling quite sick. And so again, I would have done some meditation to try and ease that, but the ginger was what I needed. So I actually would have bought a big bottle of water and put fresh ginger into it, mixed with maybe some orange slices, just to take. I don't really like the taste of ginger and water, but yeah, that was what my craving was, and that's what helped soothe some of that early sickness.
So you kind of intuitively knew you were having a girl.
Yeah.
Did you need the confirmation from a doctor to know?
And I had her named and everything. And in these journals I was writing about, I wrote down her name and everything. But I wanted confirmation this time. So in our previous two pregnancies, they were both a surprise. We didn't know. But this time round, particularly under the circumstances, and because we had the older children, and you've still got the bags of clothes in the attic. So I was like, I really just wanted to know. I wanted to know. And particularly after having those losses where you're not 100% sure those early days, whether they were boys or girls, I wanted to know this time around. Now, before you go buying stuff, I still was like, is it definitely, or before we told the kids, is it definitely a girl? So we had our 20-week scan and they confirmed they thought it was a girl. And then when we were back again a few weeks later, or I was back again, because obviously my husband wasn't allowed in with the COVID restrictions, but I said, can you please do a double check? So yeah, they double checked. But yeah.
So what did you think when they confirmed, knowing you already knew?
I know. It just was like surreal. It was like, okay, maybe that was just a fluke. And then, then I kind of had visions of her, as I said, with blonde hair, and then she came out with blonde hair. It's like, yeah, that's stronger than just, a
Yeah.
fluke. I don't know why. I just felt, and I suppose, as I say, in meditation, I just always felt that it was a little girl coming to me.
Was there any product that you couldn't live without and that you would recommend that helped during pregnancy?
I did buy the pillows. Not a big massive, like, I'm doing this, and obviously people listening are not going to see what I'm doing with my hands, but like, you can buy the big pillows for bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually got one which was more, one pillow could sit at the front. It was attached by a little Velcro attachment, and then the other one sat at your back. So it almost was like some protection at your back and some protection to pop onto your bump without a whole big thing to kick your partner out of bed because you don't have the room. So I can't even remember the brand of it, but it was amazing. And actually, it's worked out really well because I've used it now and still use it to this day for breastfeeding as well. So it really was probably my best, for through pregnancy. That was my favorite thing.
And how did you prepare for her to come?
So because I have the kids, my older two, and I suppose this is the thing, people get a little superstitious about whether you buy things before a certain date or whatever, whereas I was very much, I am being expectant. I am buying the things. I'm going to buy the products that I want, and I research different things. And because there's quite a big age difference, there wasn't many products that still we could have used really from the other two. So we did research, which, well, actually when I was in one of the hospital appointments, I saw this like car seat stroke, like the car seat, the wheels popped out. So it was a Duna car seat, where it was game changer, absolute game changer. And any person I met afterwards, after I bought it, I had to stop the guy and ask him what it was. Told my husband I wanted to buy it, and we bought it, and it was a game changer for me throughout motherhood, actually. But so we kind of did the research and certain things that we wanted to buy. We probably knew the stuff that we didn't need. All of it was, as a first time mum, you think you need these 50 products. And actually, when you're home with the baby, you're like, no, there's only 15 of them, not 50 that you need. So we kind of had an idea what we didn't need to buy, what we did need to buy. And we made it exciting experiences with the other two children. We headed off into the city to buy, the first outfit. And we went into the Disney store. We were a big Disney house. So we went in and bought like a Mickey and Minnie Mouse. So we bought things together as a family, really, and allowed the kids to get in on that excitement. And we'll just touch on it briefly. They knew that we had a loss before. So whenever we told them we were pregnant, that was quite a conversation that we had to navigate to make them feel comfortable enough that we were going to be okay, that I was going to be okay. And we wanted them to get excited. So we brought as much excitement as we could for them. So going off into the city to buy all of the different bits and pieces where, and my son bought one baby grow and my daughter bought another wee outfit, so that was little memories that they had, that they bought her first outfits and things. Mentally then the preparation was obviously well underway because of everything I had done and I continued to do. And I wrote about the birth that I wanted, and I wrote about the life I wanted afterwards. So I went in so strong on that morning when we went to have her, because I just was so ready. My body was so ready for her. My home was so ready for her. My mind was so ready for her. And I suppose this is the thing. Not everybody around me was able to hold that positivity. I know for sure my husband, I know for sure my mother, my sister were much more apprehensive and worrying about me the whole pregnancy. They really were, because of all of our history, but I wasn't I kind of had to block that out. I was like, I'm in my lane here. This is the lane I'm going in. And I could help empathize with them, but I couldn't start to let their fears and anxieties pull me down, if that makes sense. And those conversations, and to be fair, some of those conversations didn't happen until afterwards, where they really did admit just how worried they were for me, should anything have happened again. But I was in my lane. I was absolutely in my lane. I was preparing all the time. And I suppose, like, affirmations, I actually have created my own little affirmation deck here now for early motherhood, and going to do them for pregnancy as well. But I would have wrote my own affirmations and continually, and different things that came up at different parts of the pregnancy, depending on what that might have been. But coming up to the birth and knowing I was going in for a cesarean section, I had to prepare mentally for that, allowing myself to trust that I would have had the most beautiful care and one thing that I wanted, that I kind of would have always written about was that we would have the most amazing medical team looking after us, because in different scenarios you have different levels of care, really, I suppose, and depending on what time of the day or night or an experience that a particular medical staff has had, you can react differently to them. So I just wanted to have the most beautiful medical team looking after us through pregnancy and through birth. And so the affirmations I worked on around those, and I would have repeated them to myself or have journaled around them. And also the I was going to say breastfeeding. Yeah. So I didn't exclusively breastfeed either of my other two children, but I really had this feeling I wanted to do it this time around. So again, I kind of wanted to prepare my body and prepare my mind for that, because I knew it was going to be a very different thing. And that was also conversations that I had to have with my husband, because that's a different bond. It's a different, it was a different scenario perhaps than what we would have had with our other two children. I combi fed, but I'd never had exclusively breastfed. So that was, something I had to mentally prepare myself for. And actually, I'm really, really glad that I did, because I'm glad that I had those conversations, because whenever it got to the point where we went in to give birth, the midwives and things that were looking after you, at least then I was very clearly able to, again, articulate what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, we were so lucky, that the lady that was looking after us was so good. And she was, helping me hand express and things beforehand, because we knew it was a planned C-section. And my husband may have had to take the baby out and may have had to feed the baby separately himself whilst I was still getting cared for. So we had all of these things to articulate and all of these things that we were able to agree then in advance, which was great.
What about classes? Being as though this was your third, did you feel the need for any classes?
So I didn't do any classes this time around. Not specific, right? So, and this is the thing. So I didn't do any classes because of what I was learning. And this is, I suppose, the types of things now I'm teaching other mamas, because of everything. And what I had learned was from all of these different, a range of courses, a range of programs, a range of different mindset, spiritual tools. And I was bringing what I needed from each of those into what I needed within pregnancy, what I needed within early motherhood, what I needed in my fertility journey. So whilst I didn't go to, and I suppose it was COVID times as well, so there certainly were no walk-in classes or anything like that. And I think on our health service, there wasn't really much provision anyway for a third-time mum. I certainly could have done some private classes, but I didn't actually that time around, because in its own right as such, but I was certainly using all of these tools from all of the different things I was learning anyway.
Sure. How far along were you when the C-section was planned?
Is that 38 weeks? I think it was 38. I can't even remember, 38 plus something or 39. I can't remember exactly the date. It was 38 or 39. They bring you in. Mm-hmm. As I say, that was all planned, yeah.
Bring us back to that day.
Oh, I love it. This is my most favorite story. And this is the thing, particularly for this podcast, over 40 Fabulous and Pregnant, I absolutely felt fabulous when I was pregnant over 40. I didn't when I was in those younger days. So, please take comfort that you can absolutely feel flipping fabulous when you're over 40. But even with the birth, and it was the most magical birth. It really was. Now, yes, it was surgical, yes, but it was the most magical birth. And the people that were looking after us were just gorgeous. They were lovely. I arrived late to the appointment, which everybody that knows me knows I'm always late. However, I didn't exactly plan to be late to have the baby, but we were told to be there at 8:30 in the morning, and I assumed everybody would have been told to be there at 8:30 in the morning, and we arrived slightly late after leaving the other two kids off with childcare to a slightly flustered midwife going, right, okay, we need to do the papers, we need to do this. And so then she happened to mention that we were going to be the first to be taken into surgery. And so I was like, oh, right, well, when's that? She's like, about 15 minutes. So both myself and my husband were like, okay, can we run to the toilet now? Because we're kind of, a little bit, need to, and my husband laughed at me because I said, I thought I would have had more time to zen. I had intended to meditate in that room and all. And he's like, you've had 9 months to meditate. The time's done. You just go. So this midwife, but it was funny because I mentioned before how our family loves Disney. And she had number one, she had a Disney lanyard with her pass on it. And then she had unmatching Harry Potter socks on, which happens in our house as well. So I was like, we are on the right care here. We are sorted. So anyway, we went into this room. Myself and my husband disappeared for a while and come back again. And at this point then, obviously, they're preparing you and you're filling in paperwork and you're choosing which hat you want to wear on the little baby afterwards and wears the outfits and this thing. But whenever the surgeon, he then came in, and just when he walked into that room, knowing that he was going to deliver our baby was just incredible anyway. And he was laughing at me because I had got the tan on and got the curls on. And because it was planned, I was like, I am rocking this. I don't care. I'm going up. I'm getting the curls in. I'm getting the tan on. And then maybe that's why I was running late. But anyway, I don't advise that to anybody else. But to me, this was a moment I had waited at this point now, 8 years for. And I was like, I am determined to do this in the most, I'm going in style. And because I knew then dear knows what it was going to look like for days and months afterwards. So I was like, I'm going in and getting the curls on. So we went in, and at that point then they tell you when I was going in to get prepped, and my husband had to stay in the other room. So I went in to get prepped, and it was just so funny because when I went in, we already had Emma's name picked. And when I went in, there were two Emmas in the room. One girl was right beside me. She was helping me while I was getting the spinal or whatever it's called. And then there was another Emma, one of the scrub nurses as well. And I just was like, I was laughing going, I can't believe this, that not only one, but two Emmas were in the room. And the doctor, the midwife looking after me, she was called Jo as well. So it just was just all of these synchronicities were just incredible. Yeah. And whenever we went, so they started doing all of it, they get you all hooked up to all of they're there to monitor you, obviously. So some of it might say, when I got this the first time around, I certainly wasn't as calm, but knowing that they're there to monitor you and keep an eye on you, and you've got your different drips in, different medications should you so need it, that can be quite overwhelming, I suppose. But because I had seen that before, however, I didn't cope with it just as well the first time around as I had this time. They get you all prepped, and then at one point then, whenever I was waiting on the spinal or the anesthesia, whatever it's called, I did start to wobble. I was like, oh gosh, right. Okay, now I'm starting to panic a little bit. And I did say to the midwife, Jo, I says, I meant to bring a playlist in. I wasn't sure because obviously different, hospitals have different protocols, but I had meant to bring a playlist in. And she says, well, what do you want? I'll put it on my phone. So I asked for Otis Redding Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, and everybody in the room was kind of going, well, that's quite an interesting choice. And I was like, yeah, I just want something quite sort of soulful and chilled. So that's what played. And then the playlist started, going through whatever auto-generated playlist happened. And they introduced everybody in the room, which I thought was really nice. So they introduced all of the people in the room, who they were, what their jobs were. And at that point, then my surgeon came walking into the room, and he heard the music, and he was like, oh, this is quite a nice vibe. So when I talked about the energy in the room that I wanted, that was just it all played into it. All of this played into that beautiful, beautiful energy. And I had got myself calmed down, and I had got myself back into, sort of in my meditation through pregnancy, I almost put like a little protective bubble at times around myself and my baby. So I was able to kind of almost imagine that we were in a little protective little rainbow bubble, and I was able to draw in whatever I needed at that point in time from that bubble and hold her in whatever bubble I needed to. And that's what I did my whole way through pregnancy. And so that energy was what I wanted. And so at this then, and I had actually heard online or whatever with different Facebook groups, they had said, which I hadn't previously heard, to ask for the blinds to come down. So obviously whenever you're having a cesarean section, they're doing whatever they need to do at the business end. And then at whatever point, very, very close, and it's surprisingly just how close it is to when they lift the baby out, that they brought my husband in. And so obviously he's all scrubbed up as well. But what happened on the other side of the door, my husband was brought to the outside of the door, and what he could hear was, at this point, My Girl by Temptations was playing. And he was just like going, how on earth? First of all, probably tears in his eyes hearing that particular song, and also wondering, how has Jo managed to get music on in the flipping labour ward? But whatever. So he walked in at this point, and so that music was playing, and it was at that point then basically they said, right, okay, it would be time, and I would feel a little tug. So I did say to my husband, they asked that I want the blinds down. I think it's blinds, whatever it's called. And I said yes, at which point my husband was like, oh my God, what? We didn't discuss this. I said, it's fine. You'll not see anything you're not meant to see. And I asked them, could he video it as well? And they said yes. But actually one of the midwives or some of the scrub nurses or whatever, they took the phone off my husband and then they started recording. And like to have this then on camera, on video is just absolutely incredible. So, and seeing her lifted up and seeing that surgeon who I had written about for 4 years, whatever, that he would deliver her into the world, holding her up, present her to us, hold her, give her a wee hug, was just the most beautiful experience. And then, as I say, the energy in that room was just absolutely magical. And we got to, I managed to then, they got her sort of cleaned up and everything, brought her over, put her on my chest. They were able to kind of like get her on there straight away. And I actually was able to hold her on my chest the whole time, where they had warned me that I might have had to she may have had to go elsewhere. She actually remained on my chest that whole time. And the midwife that was with me there, she helped me, get to start breastfeeding and things. And it was just absolutely incredible. It really was.
Wow. You made it incredible. I love that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I don't personally think it all happened by fluke. I think it was me very consciously working with, what I could to help bring her into the world and to help hold that. And I certainly did so much work, as I say, on myself to hold that energy the whole way through the thing.
Yeah, beautiful. How was your recovery?
My recovery. So this time actually, I felt my recovery. So I had this was my second C-section. My recovery was actually much quicker, I felt, this time round than it had been the first time round. Certainly, and this I think as well as what I had to prepare for. So whenever you've had that surgery, obviously you can't walk about for X number of hours. And so the first time round, I found it very isolating. I was scared to press the buzzer in the hospital to ask for help. Whereas this time round, I knew it was like, right, I have no other option, particularly as I say, there were restrictions. So my husband wasn't even really allowed in the ward once we come back up onto the ward. So I had to, again, when I was talking about preparing for birth and preparing for whatever, I had to prepare in my mind, if I need help, I can ask for help and I will ask for help and I'll press the buzzer if I needed. If I needed somebody to lift the baby in and out. So yes, those first few days are obviously tricky. You're not really overly mobile and you kind of have to, get ready to twist like a little turtle in the bed when you're trying to get out. But in the grand scheme of things, the physical recovery this time was manageable. And now I was breastfeeding as well. So that was a different sort of element and different dynamic. But you go through it. And I suppose if I was answering this question 4 days after birth, I might have been saying, this is really, really hard. But and I think I was able to be aware, yes, it might have been hard on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. I was able to look back at the progress physically and mentally that I had made in those few days or those few weeks and see that, yes, actually I am doing really well. Funny, my posture with my middle child, because I was kind of almost protecting myself too much. My posture went, whereas this time I was kind of like, no, I need to be open. I need to, do what I can as well to help that recovery as best as possible.
How was breastfeeding? Because this is your first time breastfeeding.
Yeah.
How was that different?
Very different. And I have to say, I have loved it. I really have loved it. Now, when so it wasn't something that I felt I would naturally have been able to do out in public, for example, with my earlier children. And whether that was age, whether that was experience, whether that was all of the things we'd been through, I just was, this time I am determined that I wanted to do this. And I think a lot of this process for me was becoming really strong in what I want. And and so many different people have beliefs that they can put on you. So within my family, breastfeeding actually wasn't really a big thing. And, it's different societies, different, whatever. But my family was never big on breastfeeding. And they were all a little bit, right, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And some people would, oh, well, are you sure you'll be able to cope? You'll have to do it all yourself. And I was like, look, I might not. I don't know. It might not work past hour 1 or day 1 or week 1, but I'm going to give it a shot. But I loved it. I really did. Now, certainly those first couple of days are tricky while you're waiting on your milk coming in. But I just kept doing what I could, putting her to the breast and hoping, and again, doing whatever I could mentally to keep myself okay through those couple of days. And luckily enough, my milk did come in fairly quickly. And, it was definitely a learning curve, Jamie, because I've never had so many people look at my breast before. It was just like, no, that's not the right latch. This is the right latch. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? Or what am I doing right? And, one person's saying one thing. So you had to be okay with that. And that possibly could very easily put somebody else off. And I think as well, depending on how much support you have in those early days can possibly make a very different journey. And how much you feel you can speak up or ask for that help. And again, not everybody feels comfortable doing that. So I was very, very lucky in that, I got enough advice to be able to get through that. And so that was the first few days while we established it, but there still were days later on down the thing. And I think the biggest pointer probably for anybody else that's listening, I had this thing that I had to deal with, which was, am I taking away that bond that my husband might have with the baby? And I almost felt whenever he walked in the door that I had to hand the baby over. And so I had to get to the point because that's kind of what happened whenever we had the other two. Whereas I had to get used to the fact that actually, if this little baby is needing to cluster feed all night long or cluster feed all evening long in these early days, that's fine. And myself and my husband had a lovely conversation when she was, I don't know, maybe 10 days old. And he's like, look, you're her person right now. It's fine that she needs you right now. I will love her. She will love me. She will get to love me. She will get to know me more. But right now, you literally are her world. And, that really was a point where I thought, yeah, whilst this is at times hard, I was there for the greater good, if you know what I mean. And to know that, it was really, really nice, because I did have that thing that I worried that it would take away from that bond. Now, it's been very, very different, and I'm still breastfeeding her she's 17 months now. And it's just incredible. It just never ceases to amaze me. Our bodies, like, as I say earlier, when I was talking about being magical in pregnancy, our bodies. And the thing is that I've done every different way. I've done bottle feed, combination feed, and breastfeed. And at the end of the day, you have to do what feels right for you. For me, I wanted to do it this time around. Previously, I didn't. And you can't judge yourself, or you can't let other people judge you for what feels right for you. Those nights where you're up constantly, you hope that if somebody wants to do it, they can find that strength to continue on. But similarly, the mother's health also has to be taken into consideration. And if that's too tough, don't be putting the pressure on yourself either. And I think try and block out perhaps where, I could have easily given up if people were like, oh, well, maybe she needs a bottle, maybe she needs this, maybe she needs that. You have to be very much feel into your own intuition. Is this right for me? Is this right for my baby? Is this just a tough spell? Can we get through it? And you kind of go through little waves, because at one point, we maybe were okay for a wee while, and then she would have started a slightly different cluster feed. And I was like, what is wrong here? And I was like, how on earth are my breasts even making any, how on earth, my husband was sort of joke going, she's ready to explode. She's been on you for ages, or how are you still making milk? And it just, the wonder of the body is just incredible. And, you just have to go with just really feeling into your gut. Is this right? And ask for help when you need it, but you have to always, I suppose, take what feels right, because 5 people can tell you 10 different things.
Yeah. And mentally, how were you during recovery?
This time around, so I did have postnatal depression, certainly once, possibly twice. We in my previous children, we'd had a traumatic birth with my first child, and she was in the neonatal and different things. So I certainly struggled after her. Second child was a bit different, but I think I probably still had it with him. This time around, I mentally was doing the things I felt that was going to help me. It was like I needed to do the meditation. I needed to do things that really helped me mentally, whether that was asking for help or whether that was not asking for help or putting up whatever boundaries I felt that I needed. And what I found this time around certainly was a support network. So although I had went to baby classes with my other children, I didn't really make much of them. I felt it was much more, oh, here's the baby and she's doing some, jiggling some strings about. This time round, I really connected to and saw the absolute importance of having that connection with other mothers. And we went to this particular baby sensory class, and it just so happened that myself and one mum went for coffee one day, and then it kind of grew, and we now have this wee collective of mums, and we're all maybe slightly, some of us are very similar ages with babies, some are slightly older, some are slightly younger, and to have that environment in a non-judgmental way of going, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Why is such and such not sleeping? Or what am I meant to do with weaning? Or whatever those conversations are, which your other close family and friends at different stages of their life certainly can empathize with you or maybe give you some advice. But to have that for me was one of the biggest things, definitely this time round. And I'm so, so grateful for the mummies and the babies that we saw. And, seeing their little babies grow and develop as well, which was just really a big part for me, I think, as well as doing, as I say, all of the different things that for my mentally, so I would have sat, and this is like what I did, and I had to listen to my body when you asked me how my recovery was. And in the early days, you can easily think you have to do and you have to do and you have to do. Whereas I thought this time around, yes, I can do. And yes, I've got other children to look after. But if I'm listening to my body and it needs a rest, it wasn't upstairs sleeping all day. But what I was doing was maybe sitting on the chair, and I got my journal, and I would have, while the baby was sleeping or while she was sleeping on me, I took that time this time, Jamie. I let her contact nap. I let her lie on me. I connected to her. I would have got a journal. I would have wrote with possibly a left hand rather than a right hand. But I did those things that helped me find the strength, because navigating all of those emotions, and I suppose part of what I have learned recently is navigating your emotions in normal life, managing your vibration in normal life as a mother or as a woman or as a worker or whatever it is you are. All of those things that we are have their own things that they need and desire of you as a person, and motherhood obviously is navigating all of that, all of those things that you are is important anyway, but certainly in that early motherhood where your hormones are all over the place and your sleep's all over the place and physically and mentally, and you're trying to butter toast with one hand and that doesn't work. You have to, and this is a thing I always advocate, and we can very easily put ourselves at the bottom of the pile. And I know I did that for a long time, but now if I need something, certainly there's times where it doesn't always happen, but you do need to really look after yourself and do whatever that might be. And self-care, sometimes it might be something as simple as getting a shower without the children running around you, but it's sometimes much more than that. Sometimes it's setting up the boundaries that you need, to be able to really look after yourself and speaking up for yourself and saying that you need that 10 minutes, that half an hour on your own, or a quick walk around the block, whatever it might be. It's so, so important, because it's so important for you, but the impact that has on everybody else around you is, it's priceless.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you want to add about your pregnancy or birth?
Yeah, so we had gestational diabetes, actually, and this was the thing. Again, it's a lot of, that was another thing. It was like processing, is there something I did or I didn't do? And, you have to just give yourself a break, like your body's going through so much, so many changes, and, trying to manage that through pregnancy. I do love sweet stuff. I love my cakes. I love my toast. I love whatever. So being able to manage all of that in through pregnancy was interesting. However, actually, it really, really worked well for me, because when I look at it, I felt, and maybe that was partly what helped, because I was being quite strict with my diet. Now, I didn't have to be overly strict. I was able to, they give you advice on how you might be able to balance protein and carbs and things like this. So, I was able to have a slice of bread if I paired it with cheese or ham or something. Mm-hmm. I was able to have my my porridge if I put, like peanut butter in it or things. So there's people that can give you advice on some of these things, and there's some lovely online social accounts that help you out with those things. So it was really good, actually. So managing that through pregnancy, and it's not nice having to do the little tests and things, and obviously there's plenty of people have to do that every day, but that was something that I tried to be quite strict about. And that wasn't always easy and interesting sometimes when you ate something you thought was okay and then your levels rose way up. You're like, oh, right, that's not going to eat sweet chili chicken anymore. But, that was one of the things that I had to manage. And certainly on some of the groups, like where you've got like online platforms and online communities or whatever, people can be very, very hard on themselves and they're blaming themselves that they've got gestational diabetes and things. And, they don't need to. They really don't need to. And there are lots of places there for support to help them, little tips, little ideas like that, just to help them through, whether it's diet controlled or, with medication.
Jo, do you have any more plans to have kids in your 40s?
I will never say never. If my husband listens to this, he will kick me. But I'll say that again. I would never say never. It's interesting. And actually, over here in Northern Ireland, whenever I was getting my C-section, they almost questioned, did I want a coil put in or did I want different, whatever, what do you call it? Can't even remember the word for this thing. Contraceptives, yes. Contraceptives. It's a very, so that's discussed at the time of birth. It's then discussed at a 6-week appointment. And for me, after trying for so long, not being on contraceptive, not even thinking about it, that was actually one of the things that was quite triggering for me, actually, in the early days, where they were like, right, well, what contraceptive device do you want or whatever? It's like, I have been actively trying for whatever number of times over the 8-year period. I just didn't align to those conversations. And so I would never say never, because it doesn't feel right for me to say, no, I don't want any more children, because I've waited and waited and waited for so long. However, the one that I have right now, the 3 that I have right now in the world, I know that they're my children and they're the ones that I've longed for and hoped for and dreamed for. And, I think for us as a family, we probably are complete, but I just would never say never, because every tiny little soul, every precious little baby soul's journey is so unique and precious. And, I just would never say never, because they're all such little miracles.
Ooh, that's exciting. And what has been your biggest challenge being pregnant in your 40s?
Jimmy, I don't actually see it as being right. Actually, I will say that I was going to say the terminology, the medical speak, the terminology. I was going to say, because I felt stronger in my 40s than I did in my 20s and my 30s. But actually, when I look back now, it just reminded me, the medical speak can sometimes be very insensitive. You're almost assumed, and, there was one appointment where I did cry because somebody started asking about the testing that I wanted and the options that would happen depending on the results of those tests. And I was absolutely not aligned with that conversation at all. I was like,
yeah,
this little one has been waited for so long, and I don't want those tests. I don't want to have this conversation. And other people need to have that reassurance perhaps of some of those other tests. But for me, that was a really triggering time, that particular appointment and some of the appointments. And that's why I was saying, in that terminology, that language. So the language I was using in my own head, I was always trying to empower myself. But sometimes the language within the appointments, because of your age or because of certainly our other histories, but the age, it comes into it in those medical appointments. And that sometimes is quite tricky to deal with, to be able to remain positive. And I worry sometimes that for some women that are pregnant in their 40s or even before, and this is the thing, I think it's like 35 perhaps in here, where they start to treat you as high risk because of your age. I think that can have a negative impact on a woman, really. And to try and talk yourself back round, or to try and not allow that to kind of infiltrate your mind and put you into panic zone, anxious zone all day long, and that's exactly what I was trying to say with my pregnancy. I wanted to be empowered. I wanted to feel positive, because I felt that giving my body, my mind being strong, giving my body as much strength as I possibly could, was going to help me have a better outcome. So I think some of these languages and terminologies, we certainly don't want that all to filter in.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd recommend that would help prepare someone for pregnancy and birth over 40?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's back to those kind of, I mean, I call them truths, the triggers, the blocks, those actually allowing yourself to recognize some of those things that are in your head. So as I say, I had certain things that I needed to process, but age was definitely one of them. And I kind of, what I did with that, I mean, just as an actual practical example, was I would have allowed myself to feel into, am I agitated? Am I worried about this, about my age? And yes, I possibly was. Yes, I was in the earlier days, but I allowed myself to kind of journal around those things, to go, I'm worried about this, or, what's going to happen with, and particularly because I had that age gap, as I mentioned before, I had to go, well, am I going to be able to do the swimming runs and the football runs with the baby and breastfeed them? And, absolutely, it's a bit of a juggle act sometimes, but we all have that. But for me, then I had to kind of try and write down truths and say that I allow myself to believe that I can be an amazing mama no matter what age I am. I allow myself to show that I've got more than enough love for everybody. I have so much energy, I have so much love, I have so much to give my children no matter what age I am. So I actually you could call them affirmations or you can call them truths, whatever you want to. So I would have actually processed those. And for any of these things, Jamie, it's almost like a little onion, I call it, so you're wrapping off some of these layers. So for me, I was kind of peeling off some of these layers of fears, of anxieties or whatever, to allow me to just be really me and be so proud and positive that, and hopeful through that pregnancy. I was taking these layers of anxieties off, and some of that happened before. I genuinely believe that some of this, taking these fears away or reframing them, really reframing all of these conditioning, was part of how I actually did manage to get pregnant. But then I was continually, as and when something kind of came up through pregnancy or came up through early motherhood, that's when I would kind of journal around and feel into what actually really is the truth, because you have to really connect back to that truth that, age really is just a number and my body can do amazing things. And certainly we might need additional help, but, and it allowed me to align to what help I needed at the time as well. So, the appointments, the fertility tests and things that I went through allowed me to get clarity. Yes, that's a test I want to go for now, or that one I don't really want to go for, or this is what I might go if we did IVF, or, these kind of things. So it was just really, really connecting and peeling all those layers off.
I love that. What advice would you give yourself when you were pregnant if you could go back?
Yeah, just, and people say that this is a cliche, and enjoy it, because certainly sometimes physically and emotionally and whatever, it can be tricky. And, when you're rolling about the bed at 4:00 in the morning and trying to get the bump from here to here, sometimes it's tricky, but actually really connecting, allowing yourself to connect to that, allowing yourself to connect to the baby is just absolutely amazing. And then I did do that. And that's why I say this time around, it was so different, my pregnant at 40 for me. And there's pictures of me on my 40th birthday, and I really just feel, I just felt so, so powerful, so strong, so feminine, so everything. They talk about glowing in pregnancy. My previous pregnancies, I really didn't glow in, but certainly my pregnancy at 40, I did. But because I probably allowed myself to embrace it, and I did the work as I needed to, when things were slightly more difficult.
Where can our listeners find you on the internet?
So I am on most of the social media platforms, Intuitive Mama Coach. Got my website there, just intuitivemamacoach.com, on Pinterest and LinkedIn, all the different social platforms, but it's Intuitive Mama Coach across all of those platforms. And I suppose really I started that off, Jamie, to first of all share my journey. Whenever, as I say, back to the very start, I wanted to bring hope. I wanted to find hope for myself, and I wanted to bring hope to other women. And that was always my intention. And so I started sharing my journey throughout my fertility journey, and then through our rainbow pregnancy, and then through early motherhood. And I suppose really what I'm trying to do now is bring those services. So all of those different things that I talked about that helped me in all of those parts of the journey, I'm now bringing all of those bits together to help those mamas and those women at those stages of their own journey. And, whether that's sort of one-to-one kind of basis to kind of work through things, or whether that's in group programs. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to bring through Intuitive Mama Coach.
We need more people like you.
And that's the thing, Jimmy, I couldn't find the help I needed at the time. I know you asked about what classes were available, and I think sometimes some of the class offerings might be really good in terms of the practical sides of things, but I really, and I'm sure it's come across more than I don't really need to reiterate it, but I can't tell you the importance my mind, my spiritual connection, my connection with my baby, the connection with myself has been through all of those stages of that journey, whether that's the fertility, the pregnancy, or early motherhood, or normal motherhood. I still have to feel into what feels right for my kiddies that are 12 and 9, and that continues to change. You continue to evolve. So I can't reiterate how important it is to look after your mind and your thoughts and that connection, and how it can really, really help feeling into that intuition and finding the strength to do then what feels right, because that's not always easy.
Well, Jo, you had a beautiful story. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing.
You're more than welcome. I really am just honored to share it, and really hope it just brings some hope to some other mama.
And that was Jo's pregnancy at 40. I am so inspired by her energy and her positivity. And I do have all of her links in the description and blog post on my website. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Monday.